Central Bank of Nigeria invests more than 300 billion naira on cotton production in 2 years. Federal government to read a proper report of all forms of gridlock, illegalities and corrupt practices hindering the ease of doing business. And all business appreciates to nearly 3-week highs on Monday as fears over tight global supply grew. This is Business Express from the network service of the NTA, and we are reaching you from Abuja, the nation's capital. I am Musa Abubakar. Well, it's good to have you join us. Happy Easter to you out there. Well, let's begin with the holidays. Easter celebration signifies love as shown by Jesus Christ in his sacrificial death. It is on this note that some indigent women and youth smile home with empowerment tools to build on their skills, courtesy of the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Women Affairs, Olufunso Adebiyi.
The scriptural injunction that the one walking with the wise person will become wise mirrored with the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Women Affairs, Olufunso Adebiyi, who, in line with the federal government agenda of lifting over 100 million Nigerians out of poverty, collaborates with its church to empower 28 members on skill acquisition after 6 months training.
I work with a minister who has passion for women, and I'm a member of federal government permanent secretaries who has the responsibility to team up with my president in pulling out 100 million people out of poverty. So this is one of such programs, okay? But we sold the idea to the church bought the idea from us.
The training and empowerment of its members, the province pastor says, is a continuous one.
Well, it conforms with that expectation to show love. By the way, this is not the beginning, and it's symbolic. It's symbolic of the extension of Christian love to our community and our environment.
I thank the church for the great opportunity given to me, to us, to learn, without them collecting any amount from us.
By God's grace, I'll do exploit. I'll start from my parlor and I'll be great with it.
Training is very good. I like it. That's why I put effort to learn it.
With encouragement to build on the knowledge they acquired, the beneficiaries were urged to grow and train others for more empowerment across board. Ngozi Technical.
Key players in the cotton, textile and garment industries advocate increased investment towards reviving the sector as planned by the federal government. The central bank has invested more than 300 billion naira on cotton production in the last 2 years. Musa Aliu has more on the story.
These are key players in the cotton, textile and garment industries, discussing the progress and challenges in the revival of the sector. They discussed the investment so far from the Central Bank of Nigeria. However, they observed that the sector is not getting the desired investment as expected.
The local textile mills do not uptake enough. So the GINAs resort to exporting.
Cotton textile revival under the CBN. So if they have been able to infuse so much or to invest so much in the cotton production, they must see a way of also selling it to the textile in such a way that it will not be too costly.
Representatives of the Central Bank of Nigeria at the dialogue advocated collaboration in order to overtake foreign products in quality and affordable prices. The Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment is looking at the possibility of reviewing the national policy on textile to make it easy for investors willing to invest in the industry.
We are bringing up proposals in such a way that we will begin to grant these subsidies, those incentives that will be able to enable local producers to compete favorably with players like China.
There is now a Ctg Development Forum that is being registered. That body that will represent the entire Ctg sector of Nigeria. And in that doing, it means that that body will be the go-to body representing the Ctg sector of Nigeria.
The German Agency for International Cooperation and the European Union have indicated interest towards supporting the revival of the cotton, textile and garment industries in Nigeria.
The federal government is seeking new investors to revive the stalled brass liquefy natural gas (LNG) project. Minister of State Petroleum Resources Temepere Silva has pledged government's commitment to the completion of the project abandoned over 17 years ago. A statement by Horatius Igua, Advisor Media and Communication, says the minister was speaking during an inspection of the project site in Tuan Brass, Bayelsa State, with management of Greenville, NLG, an interested investor in the brass liquefied natural gas. Silva said government is desirous of completing the project because of the economic benefits it will bring to the nation. The brass liquefied natural gas, which has trains 1 to 4 concept with an annual projected capacity of 8.4 million metric tons, was initiated in 2005 with the groundbreaking ceremony performed by former President Olusegun Obasanjo on May 14, 2007. The minister reiterates that the direction of the government as far as gas is concerned is to use gas as transition fuel as well as diversify the nation's economy. As part of the federal government's plan to rid the Apapa port of all forms of gridlock, illegalities and corrupt practices hindering ease of doing business within the corridor, Kainde DBC reports that a port standing task team drawn from relevant agencies has been set up to dismantle the corruption network fueling the traffic logjam within the port area.
If we have the minimal standard coming in, then we don't expect frequent breakdown of trucks within the port or along the corridor. So that will definitely ease congestion within the port.
I believe that once we put sufficient enough willpower behind this task team and support it, we'll see the fruits of that particular effort begin to bear for the benefit of our maritime space.
There's going to be a very good, robust administration and operations in the ports.
We are the clearinghouse. Any problem that happens at the port will also have a ripple effect on the highway.
Still holiday season, and our focus on the program today is tax compliance for nation building. Joining me is Michael Ango, Partner Tax Advisory and Regulatory Services, Anderson, Nigeria. You're welcome to Business Express.
Welcome, thank you.
Okay, Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world at 8%. And so far, figures from the FIRS shows that 41 million people in Nigeria pay tax. Is that a source of concern?
Well, depends on how you want to look at it. I don't think the issue is the number of people who pay taxes.
Okay.
I think the most important thing is where do the taxes go to, and then how much of the taxes, how much tax is being collected. You started by stating that Nigeria had one of the lowest tax to GDP ratios at 8%, which should be a source of concern. But again, even in saying that, I think the most important statistic really that a lot of people do not avert their minds to is the reality that what is important sometimes is not so much your tax to GDP ratio. What is important is actually the quantum of taxes being collected. The tax to GDP ratio is a construct. Basically, you are saying that so much economic activity takes place within a country, and so because of that amount of economic activity, you expect a commensurate amount of tax collection. But there are several factors that limit the ability to collect taxes in a country. One of which is, for example, the size of the informal sector. So in Nigeria, we have a very large informal sector. Most of our businesses are not formal in that sense. So you would expect that people who are not organized, like the banks or multinational companies, will not be readily available to be taxed. One, because they're not easily identifiable. Two, maybe because of the level of the businesses they run. So, like I said, for me, what is more of concern is how much taxes are we collecting, and are these taxes being collected efficiently? We may not ever get to the 16 or 15% peer country ratio, but if we're able to collect the taxes and then we're able to use those taxes to provide the services that government should provide to our people, then I think we'll be at a comfortable level. And as for the 41 million figure, I think it's a significant amount. If you take 200 million as our population, give or take.
But most of, even within the 41 million, we are talking about mostly personal income tax.
That's the point, and that's the point. There's so many other taxes that people should pay. For example, capital gains tax, which is a tax that you pay if you sell an asset and you make a gain on it. Very few people pay that tax. It's also an income tax in that sense. You have stamp duties, for example. If you have a transaction with someone, you buy land, you buy a vehicle, there's agreements where you sign off and then you're supposed to stamp those agreements and pay stamp duty. So there is a large number of taxes that are not being collected, or if at all collected, not being collected efficiently. And the focus has always been very narrow. Personal income tax, companies income tax, petroleum profit tax, VAT.
Okay, you talked about VAT.
Yes.
There's this issue of remittances by third parties. What's the way out?
Okay, what it is that VAT, as you know, is a tax on consumption. So if I buy an item that is subject to VAT from you or from a merchant, I'm supposed to pay VAT on that item, and then the merchant is supposed to then remit the tax to the Federal Inland Revenue Service. But there are some instances in which the person who is supposed to pay the VAT, the law mandates you to withhold it. So if, for example, you're in the oil and gas sector, for example, or you're a government agency, an MDA dealing with a third party, a contractor, for example, the law has said, look, you don't have to pay the money directly to the contractor, just withhold it and pay it for ease of compliance. Now, what has happened is our laws have been a bit lax in terms of accounting for VAT. So what has happened is that in the Finance Act 2021, a stipulation has been made that either way, whether I pay the VAT to you or I withhold it, someone must account for the VAT. Because, a transaction could occur where I don't even charge you VAT. For whatever reason, maybe I don't know, or I don't put the VAT on the invoice. And so what the law has said is that irrespective, between myself and you, between the vendor and the customer, one person must account for the VAT. And this is also applicable to non-residents, i.e. foreigners who transact with Nigerians. If a foreigner transacts with you, he should include the VAT in his invoice, and then, of course, you should withhold the VAT and pay to the FRS. But even if he or she doesn't, you will still be responsible for accounting for the VAT, so that, that VAT is never actually lost to government.
Okay, the issue of citizens not actually convinced to pay tax. How do we get them convinced? Because, we always look at tax, widening the tax net. But it's also about the money you give out there should be judiciously used in a transparent and accountable way.
So this is an interesting one, and the way I always answer this question when I'm asked is to say there's a law that you must not drive against traffic. What we typically say is one way in Nigeria. Okay. So will you say that because government has not fixed the roads, you will now be driving one way? Tax, as we all know, is a legal obligation. It is a law that mandates you and I to pay taxes. I'm sure if you had a choice, you would not pay taxes on your salary, for example. Yeah. But it's a law. And so the first thing is that you have an obligation to comply. Of course, there's a social contract between the government and the people. And so if people pay taxes, if they take out of their hard-earned income and give it over to the government, of course not voluntarily, but they would expect that, okay, at the very least, let us have some form of security, let us have some good roads to drive on, let us open our taps and see water. If our children fall ill or we ourselves fall ill, we should be able to walk into a government hospital and get, if not free medical care, maybe subsidized medical care and all of that. So it's a conversation that will continue. It's been on from the beginning of time until today. People are always saying, look, why should I pay taxes? Have I seen what government is doing with the taxes? I think that is also part of the citizen advocacy.
But it should be some sort of transparency, and accountability.
Well, in fairness to the federal government,
because it should not be a one-way traffic, it should be a two-way traffic.
So let me say, in fairness to the federal government, at least talking from the experience that I have had with the Federal Land Revenue Service, they publish the figures that they collect. There's some level of transparency. I mean, just before we got into the studio, I was looking at the tax collection figures, and I can tell you tax collection figures going back 10 years or even 15 years as it were. So we know what the tax collection figures are. Of course, do not forget that because of this federal system that we run in Nigeria, not all of the taxes are retained by the federal government. So tax collection, companies income tax, VAT, petroleum profit tax is put into the pool and it's shared between the federal government, the states, and the local governments. So you can press the federal government for accountability and transparency, but you must also press the state governments, you must also press the local governments. At the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the citizens. If you go to your bank today and you find a strange charge in your bank account, you will certainly say to your bank account officer, what is this charge about? So citizens must also begin to inquire from the government at all levels, because focus is always on federal government. We must inquire at all levels. Look, what is happening with our taxes? And sometimes, you find that if citizens ask questions, government responds. You see sometimes someone will say, oh, there's a bad road from point A to point B, and in the next day or two or a week, you find out that the Minister of Works comes out and says, oh, yeah, we've identified that bad patch and we'll fix it. So Nigerians also need to be up and doing and to demand.
But should tax be the only source of fiscal instrument?
Well, not necessarily. So you see, the sources of revenue to governments globally are very limited. First, of course, if you have mineral resource like we do in Nigeria, crude oil, precious metals, gold, silver, diamonds, whatever, you can sell them. That's one way. The second way is, of course, taxation. The third way is borrowing. And, with our experience in Nigeria with borrowing, we can see that borrowing is also not an infinite means of getting revenue, because ultimately you will need to pay back those revenues that you get. For minerals also, they're not infinite. Minerals will finish one day. Your crude oil has a lifespan. Even your gas will have a lifespan and all of that. Taxation, on the other hand, is something that can continue until eternity. As long as there are people within that country, you can tax them. And so it's the most stable and secure means of revenue generation. And that's why you find that governments world over, especially in the developed countries, focus significantly on taxation. But more importantly, taxation is the major link that the citizens have in governance, because the citizens believe that we are funding government and we can also ask for certain things from government, because there has been some inputs into governance by the citizens.
Okay, there's this World Bank report which says Nigeria must raise revenue to GDP ratio to 15% in 3 years. Is this too ambitious?
Not necessarily. If you look at what has happened in 2020, the Federal Inland Revenue Service collected 4.9 trillion in the midst of COVID. Last year, 2021, they collected 6.4 trillion, which is an increment of about almost 2 trillion, off the top of my head, about 1.6 trillion, right? So it shows you that if there is commitment, and of course, if there's cooperation from the citizens, and then the systems are put in place, laws are enforced, ease of compliance is made very easy. People can pay at different multiple channels, whether online, you don't have to walk into a bank, you can sit in your house. Audits can be done virtually.
You talked about ease of compliance. How do we make it as easy as possible?
Well, I mean, the truth is that technology these days has made a lot of things a lot easier. I can sit down here and transfer 100 million naira to you. I wish I had that in my account, of course, but so people can pay their taxes online. They can file their tax returns online. We have Tax Pro Max now introduced by the Federal Inland Revenue Service. The whole idea is to level with the people. We've had finance bills or acts passed over the last 3 years. We're trying to simplify our tax laws so that people can understand what their obligations are. Taxpayer enlightenment and education, all these are things that will feed in. And then, of course, like you rightly said, let people begin to see the benefits of the taxes that they pay. If you come out of your house and you have a smooth ride from your house to the office, next time the taxman comes to say, look, pay your tax, you don't say, well, it's true. Instead of the 45 minutes it used to take me to commute from home to the office, it now takes 15 minutes. They're saving me fuel, they're saving me repairs of my car, so I can give them some of the savings in form of taxes. Okay, so yeah, at the end of the day, the government has a role to play in terms of making sure that compliance is easy. But ultimately, it falls back to us as citizens, you and I, and every other person, to ensure that we are able to contribute our quota.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael Ango, Partner, Tax Advisory Regulatory Services, Anderson, Nigeria.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Now moving on, NGX defies Easter low as investors gain 1.9% in 4 days. Aisha Musa has more on the market in the week ended.
The market opened for 4 trading days last week as the federal government of Nigeria declared Friday, 15th April and Monday, 18th April public holidays to commemorate the 2022 Easter celebrations. The NGX All-Share Index appreciated by 1.99% to close the week at 47,558.45. And the market capitalization appreciated to 25.639 trillion naira. A total turnover of 1.247 billion shares worth 22.372 billion naira in 23,406 deals were traded this week by investors on the floor of the exchange. The financial service industry led the activity chart with 975.776 million shares valued at 10.678 billion naira, traded in 13,097 deals. The consumer goods industry followed with 65.187 million shares, worth 1.752 billion naira in 2,725 deals. The third place was the service industry with a turnover of 42.614 million shares worth 135.745 million naira in 1,172 deals. Traded in the top 3 equities are Guarantee Trust Holding PLC, Zenith Bank PLC, Fidelity Bank PLC, which accounted for 429.65 million shares worth 7.768 billion naira in 5,871 deals, contributing to 69.25% of the total equity turnover. A total of 14,242 units of exchange-traded products, ETPs, valued at 492,229.40 in 14 deals, while a total of 245,278 units of federal government bonds were traded in 18 deals. All other indices finished higher with the exception of the NGX ISM, NGX Growth, and sovereign bond indices, which closed flat. 51 equities appreciated in price, 18 equities depreciated in price, while 87 equities remain unchanged. Aisha Musa for Business Express.
Well, let's now join Ineka for Global Stocks Report.
Asia market struggled for direction on Monday, with investors reacting to the release of Chinese economic data, including fourth quarter gross domestic product figures. This came as investors digested the People's Bank of China's Friday announcement for a reserve requirement ratio cut on April 25. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 fell 1.08% to close at 26,799.71. The Shanghai Composite was down 0.49% to 3,195.52, while markets in Hong Kong are still closed for Easter holidays. In the US, stock futures declined in early trading as a week of major first quarter earnings reports kicked off. Futures on the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 74 points. S&P 500 shed 0.42% and Nasdaq 100 was lower by 0.6%. Meanwhile, markets in Europe and some parts of Africa are still closed for Easter holidays.
Do join us again on Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. for another package. I am Musa Abubakar. Enjoy the holiday.